So there's been a lot of focus on Israel, but let me go to a country that's not getting a lot of focus. Armenia is the world's first Christian nation. It's home to the Bible Mount of Noah's Mount Ararat. It faces an existential threat. Armenia has withstood centuries of Muslim persecution and is the only remaining Christian nation in the Middle East. In September, the Islamic nation of Azerbaijan cleansed 120,000 American Christians and publicly stated its intention to conquer all of Armenia. And my question is, why don't we hear anything? Why has it been so silent from the U.S. on this front? These are friends and allies as well. It's right here in Armenia. And then how would you ensure that this bastion of ancient Christianity is safeguarded?
Bob, the only thing I would say is I've tried not to be silent about it. Been about as vocal as I can about this issue on the presidential campaign trail, a different part of the Russian periphery that you don't hear about. I'm going to give you the uncomfortable truth of why I think that is. It's Christians who are being persecuted. That's the answer. There's certain classes right now in the intersectional hierarchy that are lower on the totem pole of who you're supposed to be concerned about, and Christians aren't high on that hierarchy. That's the truth. I'll share another uncomfortable truth. It's a little controversial, but it's why you don't hear about the Christians being persecuted in Ukraine. Last week or 2 weeks ago, the legislature banned the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. It's the same pattern. Now, in Armenia, you have 1994 as the year of the Budapest Memorandum. You hear a lot about that. 1994 was also the year the international community recognized that Nagorno-Karabakh, the Artsakh region, was an autonomous region. 2 months ago, this September, where's Armenia? Where's both of our political parties? Armenia just steamrolls right through. 120,000 Armenian Christians, the oldest Christian nation in the world, displaced. And here's the even dirtier little secret at the heart of that. We're paying for it. In both cases, in Ukraine, but also in Azerbaijan, because the Azerbaijani lobby has succeeded in actually getting a lot of money, Section 907 exemptions and otherwise, to send U.S. arms to Azerbaijan. It is shameful. And so I think that we need to stand for what's true and right, not by intervening militarily, but by opening our eyes to the truth that we already have intervened militarily by sending our money and our arms to Azerbaijan, and it's wrong. And I think whether it's wrong, whether you're the persecution of Christians in Ukraine to Armenia, I think that it's time to stand up for what's actually right and not just what the media is feeding us to pay attention to.
Governor DeSantis.
If the roles were reversed, the media would be panicking about what's going on there. And I agree with Vivek. I think that how they treat persecutions of Christians is much different than how they would treat persecutions of others. I think you also see the same in how they're treating the Israelis that are fighting back. People say a ceasefire. You know, there was a ceasefire on the morning of October 7th. They had already agreed to one, and Hamas broke it. So Israel's just supposed to sit there and let their people get massacred and not respond? So you have these moral panics when it fits the narrative of the elites, but when it doesn't, you don't. So I think the United States should be standing for the Christians in Armenia. I think that it's a noble cause.
You know, one of the things we focused on the most, you know, along with everything else when I was at the United Nations, was the persecution of Christians and religious liberty. And we always fought for religious liberty. And I remember there was a resolution they tried to pass multiple times that would allow the investigations of ISIS in Iraq. And there were many Christians that were persecuted there. And they couldn't get it done, and they couldn't get it done. And I negotiated with Iraq to get the investigations open for Christians as well as Yazidis that was happening at the time. The media didn't want to talk about that. You know, it wasn't anything. Anything that we did for religious freedom, whether it was the Rohingya in Burma, whether it was, the fact that one of the things we focused on that was so important was when we got that resolution done, we wanted all of the aid to go help those Christians, help those Christian organizations in Ukraine. We wanted to go directly to the organizations, which were like Samaritan's Purse and others, rather than going through the UN and doing that. And, Mike Pence was a good part of that, and we did that, and we were able to do that. But again, they didn't talk about those. You didn't hear them talking a whole lot about Israel. The thing is, if you go back and look at any country that doesn't respect religious liberty, you usually are going to see conflict happen. You're going to see that happen. The only thing that I'll say is that we have to always look at, when you look at the persecution of Christians or anyone, we have to call it out for the human rights issues that it is. No matter where it is, no matter who it is, you have to call it out. Because the media doesn't pick it up, for me, I'm not surprised, because they never picked it up a day I was at the United Nations. But does that mean we shouldn't fight for it? No, you should always fight for it. What happened in Azerbaijan is a travesty. And you see what happened there. And we're going to see it happen in other countries. But we have to continue to call things out like that when we see it. And you're not going to hear Biden talk. Sorry, I wasn't supposed to mention this. You're not going to hear them talk about that. Yep. But the reality is, it goes back to what our values are. And our values are, if we ever see Christians persecuted anywhere, don't just say it, but what actions are we going to do behind it? And we should be calling out Azerbaijan, and we should be talking about it. But it also goes to the fact of, we should be focused on who it is that we're helping and who it is that we're supporting. Why do we support countries that we support? And it goes back to, I strongly believe we need to be looking at where our foreign aid goes.
Amen.
Because when I was at the United Nations and we moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, we were condemned by the entire world. And I was proud to do the U.S. veto and let them hear my say on that. But I was so angry, I went to my office and I said, I want you to come up with a book. I want you to list all 193 countries at the UN. I want the second column to be the percentage of times they voted with the U.S. and against the U.S. And I want the third column to be how much foreign aid we gave them. And I took that book and I gave it to President Trump. And he lost his mind. He's flipping out pages. He's yelling out countries. And what I said to him was,
how could this be?
He was yelling it all.
Sorry, I stop. All right. Go ahead.
It was quite the scene. It really was. He's flipping pages. He's yelling out countries. And I said, look, I'm not saying that you give foreign aid based on a percentage vote of the UN. But that should be one of the things we look at. Quit trying to buy friends. Quit paying off enemies. We gave $50 billion last year in foreign aid. Do you know who we gave it to? Iraq, who harbored terrorists that tried to kill our soldiers. Zimbabwe, the most anti-American African country there is. We gave money to Belarus, who's holding hands with Russia as they invade Ukraine. We gave money to Cuba, we named a state sponsor of terrorism who's put a spy base up off the coast in Cuba. And this is the one that makes me sick to my stomach. We gave money to China. When I am president, we will no longer give money to countries that hate America. We can't have that anymore.